Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Tech Tuesday. My name is Vanessa with ITS, and today we're going to be talking about project management scheduling within Microsoft Excel. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, for facilitation, we have John Chalet, who's the Assistant Director of Project and Portfolio Management with OSPM, which is the Office of Service Portfolio Management. Our project management team sits directly within this group. So before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know we are expecting quite a few people to log in. So I do have all of your microphones muted just to prevent some, accidental background noise. But if you have any questions at any point during today's session, please feel free to put it in the chat. Or if you'd like to ask your question on the mic, all you have to do is raise your hand within Zoom and we'll get to you as soon as we can. I'm also recording today's session. So if you'd like to look over this content again or even share it with some of your colleagues who may have been unable to attend today's session, please expect a follow-up email from me within the next 24 hours. It'll have a link to this recording as well as some helpful guides and links from John. So without further ado, I am going to hand it off to John. Thank you so much for joining us today, John.
Thank you for the introduction, and I am happy and proud and really appreciate being here, especially to talk about a topic that I enjoy so much. Yes, I am that person, that Excel geek. But yes, I am the Assistant Director of the Project and Portfolio Management practice within the Office of Service Portfolio Management. I've been in project management for, I keep forgetting the time frame, for about 10 to 15 years, somewhere between there, because there was a lot of overlap in my previous life when I was a software engineer. So, the topic of Excel for Project Manager is one near and dear to me because Excel just has been a tool that has always been reliable. It's been a foundation of all the things that I need to do, that I can do, and that I must do in project management. There are many, many, many different tools out there that'll allow you to manage your projects in effective and tracked all of their data and progress and so on in many different ways. But Excel has been the one where if I just need to hop on a project and just create some really quick tracking tools and start to measure and monitor the progress of my project, Excel has always been there. And so I think it's important that from a foundational perspective, uh, for people to learn how to use Excel as a quick and easy and simple tool to manage their projects. Now, today's presentation is obviously focused on Excel, but I don't intend to go deep into the Excel universe of functionality and all the things that it can do. It is a massive tool that has a large amount of functions and capabilities, and that integrates with other tools. The intention of this presentation is to show you just at the surface how strong Excel can be by using its core, simple, on-the-surface functionality, using just a few formulas to get you started. And from there, you can continue to build and enhance the tool as you see fit, as you need, and as the project needs you to do that. So that's really going to be the focus of today. And of course, if you have any questions during the presentation, please post them in the chat. I'll do my best to look at them, but I will be focused, of course, on the presentation itself. And then we'll have some time at the end to get some of those questions answered. And then Vanessa, just want to confirm with you after I've already spoken for about 5 minutes. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, John, you're sounding great.
Okay, great. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to ask for your confirmation one more time, Vanessa, that I am sharing and you could see it well.
It is loading. Just give it a minute. There we go. I see your Excel screen.
Perfect. It should be just a blank Excel sheet.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So I just double clicked on Excel, opened a blank Excel sheet from scratch. There's nothing here. There's no behind the scenes. There's nothing that I've done to prep this sheet. This is brand new. Um, so one of the things in project management, whenever I'm assigned either work or a project, the first thing I like to do is figure out who's who on the project. Who do I have to interact with? Who are other members of the project? Are there any other resources or key team members already assigned to the project? Who's going to be requesting the work that the project is intended to deliver? Just a list of, we call it a stakeholder list. I'm just going to call it resources for the sake of this. And so I'm going to create a tab here. I'm going to call this resources. And now I like to create another tab just as a baseline And I call this one controls. We're going to get to this, why this is needed and why this is really helpful in a bit. But I like to have these two to start off with. And of course, as any project would need, a project schedule. So we're going to call this schedule. So I like to start off with this. So first, just from a perspective of listing out who's who on the project, that's what I like to do. And it's really helpful to know the role that people play and obviously their name. You could add in as much information or as little information here as you want. You could add in a contact number for that person, depending on how you're going to reach them. It could be an email, it could be a phone number, just how you're going to contact them. It could be location, it could be skill set, whatever you want to add to your stakeholder registry, or in this case, resources. And I just realized I added this to the wrong tab. So we're going to do this here. Okay. It could be whatever information you want. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to have the role that they play on the project and the name of the project. It would be helpful to know, for me to start off with, we're going to be running through an example project, one that I think is something that everybody would understand and can relate to. I know we have a lot of different skill sets, a lot of different experiences, and people on this call who manage different types of projects. And all projects have different flavors. There's IT projects, software projects, clinical trials projects, research projects, capital projects. Uh, I've decided for this presentation, I think everybody would be able to understand building a house, sort of a construction project. And if you have any recommendations, I'll try to do some engagement through the chat. Please feel free to post that in the chat. I do have it open, so I will be able to see it. Okay, so for building our home, let's start listing off the types of resources that we know we're going to need. We're obviously going to need a project manager. We'll need an architect. We'll need a contractor, a framer. Can't forget the resources that are requesting. They're going to live in the house. They're asking for the house to be I usually call them, instead of homeowners in this case, for any project, you could use the agnostic term sponsor. They're sponsoring the project. Uh, you'll usually have more than one sponsor. Sometimes you can have more than one sponsor with different roles. In this case, we have two sponsors. In this case, it is a family that's going to be buying the house. So you'll have sponsor one and sponsor two. Now, I use that as an example because, and we'll get to why a little bit later. If you're going to have multiple people with the same role, it's good to distinguish here either a separate title for them, or you could just add in one, two, three. In this case, for sponsor, we'll do one and we'll do two. It's not a must, but it does come in handy later on, as I'm showing you, as you're going to start assigning these roles and these resources to different tasks or different items in the project later on. And so it will come in handy. So it's good to have unique role names for each individual. So in this case, we have a couple who's a sponsor, so we'll do sponsor one and sponsor two. You'll need a mason for the foundation and for landscaping and so on. You'll need a plumber, an electrician, an inspector, and a painter. I'm sure you'll need a lot more resources than this, and it's going to be more than just one for each. But in our example, this is what we're going to be working with. Now I'm just going to add in names. These are just names that were AI generated names to keep it simple and generic. So I'm just going to copy and paste it here. I already have them open. So now I have my table. Sorry, what to do? Yes. So now I have my list of roles and names. So first thing I like to do is when I have a table like this is actually create a table in Excel. So you could highlight the table that you've created. You can go to Insert and click Table. Or you can do, as it's showing here, Control T. So I'm going to click Table. My table does have its own headers, so we're going to check that off. And so now I have my table, and I like to do a little bit of formatting. Very simple, nothing too colorful. I like this light formatting here. And just as a personal aesthetic thing, this has nothing to do with any kind of functionality, just my own personal aesthetic. I never start in the first column. I usually start in the second column. I'm going to move this over here. And I make the first column the same width as the first row. So in this case, we'll make it 20 pixel. First row, 20 pixels. That's just an aesthetic decision that I choose to do. It lets me see it a little bit better. I don't like that it's always pressed up against when you're using the first column. This index row right here. So this is something that I choose to do every time. You could do 20, you could do 10, whatever you choose. For me, this works. And then often than not, again, for aesthetics, I like to get rid of the grid line. Where is it? Yes, there it is. So now we have our resources table. So that's all great. So now let's get into our project schedule. That's the next thing I like to do on my projects. And so a project schedule has a lot of different data that you could add to it. I'm going to do the same thing here with the 20. Of course, you need the task that you're going to be accomplishing, who's assigned to the task, the status of the task, start. In this case, you do start date of the task. Now, there's different ways that you can do the time frame. You could do start and end and calculate your duration, or you could do start and then have your duration, and then you can calculate the end date. It's really up to you. I would recommend you do a start date, and then you do a duration as input fields, and you calculate the end date. And I'll show why again in a little bit. It'll come in handy when you're building out your Gantt chart. It'll allow it to be flexible. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna spread these out a little bit. I don't think we need as big of a space here. These will look the same there. Actually, all three of these, I think. And duration could be a little bit smaller. Make task a little bigger, just so again, we kind of set up and configure our table. Now, you don't have to have the data already in your table in order to create it. And so in this case, I know I'm going to need a table. So I'm just going to highlight this again. I'll highlight the first row as part of the table. Insert table or Control T. My table has headers. So now I have my table. You could also name your table. So if you go into your table again, I like the light style. I'm going to name this schedule. And I do think it's important to name your tables because now you have a reference. Every time you want to reference a table, you could just type in the word schedule, and now your reference is dynamic to all the data in the table. And as the table shrinks and grows and more information is added, it's automatically included in whatever reference you're using. And we're going to go back here and do the same thing. Resources. Okay. And you can name it whatever you want, but the thing about table names is you can't have spaces. And so if you want to call this a resource table, you can do a dash or you could do an underscore. I like to use underscore resource table. Okay, so now we have our schedule. So I want to start adding in generic home building tasks. If you want me to include anything, please add it into the chat. I'll add it into the table here. But I have a list here that I've created. So first, in project management, we have requirements gathering. So in this case, we're going to give the architect the requirements. How many rooms do we want the house to be? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? How many living rooms, great rooms, ceiling length, all these things that you may want in your home as you're building it. You have to give that to the architect. The architect will create a blueprint. And then once you have that blueprint, you're going to submit your plan for bids. You're going to bid out who's going to be the contractor to do the work. Yes, permits. So once you have your bid, I'm not a home builder myself, but once you have your bids and you've selected your contractor, you can work with them on the permits. So let's add that here. Submit for plans, receive and review. I'll say 3 bids. Select, let's say best bid, and then you want to do submit for permits. Great suggestion, Nicole. Thank you. And then you want to, once you have your permits, we'll say receive permits. And then once you have everything ready, you want to clear the land that you have. Clear the land for the foundation. And so on. The list can go on and on. I have a predefined list here, and for time's sake, I just want to make sure we can get to everything. I'm just going to copy and paste it here. So you'll see, well, after you poured the foundation, you'll install the drainage, frame the house. You want to add the roof after you've added the frame, install all of your utilities, install your electrical wires, interior work, adding up your walls and your floors, install fixtures, painting and flooring, inspection, and move in. Now, again, I understand there's a lot more to building a home than this, but for the sake of this example, I think this is good. And just to ensure that everybody could see this, because even for me it's a little small, I'm just gonna zoom in here a little bit. But I hope that's better for folks.
Yeah, that looks
Okay,
really good, John.
okay, great. Okay, so now you have your list of tasks, and now you want to start to do the assign to. Now, one of the things about the assign to is you always want to make sure that you're only assigning resources that have been added to your project, that you know have been assigned or allocated or have been told that they're working on your project. And so if you just keep this a free-form field, there's a lot of different mistakes that could happen. You could assign people that haven't been assigned to your project. You could mistype their name. And this way, when you start to do reporting at a different level, then now you have two people of the same name or the same person, but two different names in here. So one way to help resolve that issue and not have to worry about that is through the data validation functionality in ServiceNow. So before we do that, we're going to go back to our resources, and we talked about this is the reference, a table is a reference, and this is called this resource table. So what I want to do is I only want to be able to reference each individual columns in the table as well. So if you click on formula, you'll see this thing called name manager. So you'll see this is being used to manage the scheduled table, the resource table, and I want to create a new name. And I'm going to call it the roles underscore titles because that's what it is. It's the roles title. And I want to reference here, we'll get rid of that, the equal. If you hover just over here, you can click on that and it actually selects all of the roles within this column. And it does it by name, which is really interesting because we'll show why in a second. I'll click OK. And I'll click close. So now you could reference the roles, and actually let's do the same thing for the name. New, let's do resource name equal, the same thing like that. There we go. Close. So now if you go to schedule, if you click on the first column here, under the data tab at the top, you'll see data validation. If you click that. So now it allows any value. We don't want any value. We want only values that are included on this list. So the source is, you could do a couple things here. You could actually include the list here directly. So you could include John, Frank, Paul. If you click OK, it allows you to choose John, Frank, or Paul, and only John, Frank, or Paul. If I decide to include Victor, it won't let you, it'll give you an error. We'll cancel that. But we don't want that, right? We want to pull from that list. So we click equal, and we do resource underscore, I believe I called it names. Name specific. Maybe I misdid that. So let's remember what that name was. Formula. The S I added was incorrect. Now we'll go back to data validation. Equal resource name. That worked. So now you have a list of all of your resources, so you can select them or you can type them. Jane Smith. In this case, I think John Chalet, as the project manager, would be the appropriate person to add here. So that's one way of ensuring that you will always be assigning resources that have been assigned to the project. And one of the things that's really cool about this is if I happen to get more resources on the project, so we have a painter, let's just say we have an interior designer, and we'll say that is Stephanie Miller. Okay. If you click back here, Stephanie Miller has been added to the list. So it's very dynamic. You don't have to worry about keeping up with a lot of the data validation behind the scenes, and you can do all that here. So again, for the sake of time, I am just going to copy and paste what I have here. And all these names do match. Oh, we have the permit that's a little bit different. So let's do that. And we'll start off there. And we'll say the contractor is going to be responsible for how are you toggling between the schedules, the tab at the bottom? Yes, so you have the tab here. You just go back and forth between. I click on it. I'm sure there's a keyboard shortcut that you could use. I just click back and forth between the two. I'm going to show you another way that you could use a formulaic approach to select the role and have it auto-populate with a name. So we're going to get to that in just a second, but let me just fill in the contractor would do that. And the contractor in this case is Joe Jones. So we'll do that. Okay. Now, but that is a good question. Sometimes, especially at the beginning of a project, you don't know the name of the person that's fulfilling the role, or you may only know the role that's responsible for a task, but not the person. And so it can get a little tedious going back and forth between these two tabs and identifying the role with the person. So what you can do is you'll insert a tab here called role. And you could do the same thing. Now, because I inserted it, it's taking off of the validation from this tab, so you'll see it's the same validation. To clear it, you can do clear validation. That worked? No. Okay. So if you clear it, like there, you go to any, okay. And you want to clear it for the whole table. Yes. Any volume. So now it is now clear. And so there's no data validation here. But what you can do is you want to do the data validation for the roles. So just to make sure I don't run into the same issue as last time, let me confirm the name. So name manager. We have a resource. Did I misspell that? Role title. That's what I want. Okay. Go back to data validation. List equals referencing the name. And so now it's there. And then what you can do is, since it didn't actually, sometimes with a table, it'll just auto-populate the validation across the entire table. In this case, it didn't. So you could just take a look at, you can copy and paste, or you can do this little drag and drop here. You'll see this little square at the bottom right corner. You drag it all the way down, and the name validation is there. Okay. So where this comes in handy is if I were to select, for example, architect, I'd want it to auto-populate the person to do it here. In this case, maybe I'd want to do the designer. Maybe they will do the interior and fixture work as well. And so what you can do is, this is where the formulaic work comes in place equal. There's a formula called V lookup, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's a reference for vertical lookup. And what you're doing is you're looking up a value in a separate table and then pulling a different value from a different column in that table. So we're going to go through that now. So first parameter in this VLOOKUP function is lookup value. What value do I want to look up? I want to look up here. So I click on this, and so now it will know that I want to look up this value. And so then it asks you for a table array, just Excel's fancy way of saying, what table do you want to look up? And this is why table names matter, because I could just type in resource table. So I want to look it up in the whole table. Now, one thing about VLOOKUP is it looks up the value in the first column only of the table array. That's just a function of how this function works. You can't change that. And so it's only going to look up designer in that first column, which is important to make sure that your first column is how you're going to be indexing all of the other values in the table, and why it's important, as I mentioned earlier, that you have unique values for each of the rows in that table. And so that's why I chose to do sponsor 1 and sponsor 2. If you're going to have developers, if you're going to have investigators or whomever, you could just name them 1, 2, 3, or you could do a different indexing method. It's up to you, but that's why it's important to have unique values there. Okay, so now I'm looking up designer in the resource table. And so once it finds the word designer, what value is it going to pull from? What column is it going to pull from? In this case, there's only 2 columns, so I'm going to have it pull from the second column. And then when it has I don't know if you could see it, these square brackets around the parameter, that means it's an optional parameter. You don't have to put it. But I'm going to do that here, and it's asking, do you want an approximate match, or exact match? It actually gives you some information here around it. I'm going to do exact match. Oh, what happened there? Do exact match. Close my function. This value doesn't match the data validation restriction. So okay. So there's data validation here, which is why it's not going to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that. We will clear the data validation here for this row only. Enter it in, and now it is Stephanie Miller, who's our designer. If I want to choose the architect, it moves it to Jane Smith. If I want to choose it to framer, it does the same thing. Now, again, because you're using references in this case, it actually will continue updating without you having to do anything based off of the table. So if I were to make the table smaller, So now the table actually doesn't include Stephanie Miller. It only includes everybody from Painter and above. And so you won't see designer there. And it won't ask you here to select Stephanie Miller. So it is dynamic with the table. So we're gonna go back here and do that. Okay. So in this case, I want the contractor to no, I want, sorry, the designer to choose to do the interior, sorry, I want the contractor to do the interior work, and I want the designer to do the fixtures. Now, I didn't do it here, so I could just, again, right down there. Now we're good to go, and it does that. Again, this is why I always recommend with Excel, keep it as simple as possible. If you start to go down the route of really complex integrations and references, it gets very difficult to maintain just the structure, let alone the actual data in it. So keep it as simple as possible. And you could also do it the other way around. You could select it based off of the assigned to and the role. But in order to do that, you would actually have to do some creative work, a little more complex around how you structure the table, switch the name to be the first column, and then you could do the other way around. I chose this way because it's a little bit easier for me. Okay, so we'll forget status for just a second. We'll come back to that. Now I want to start with dates. And so this couple is really eager to get started. They have everything that they need. They have the requirements. So they want to get started as quickly as possible. So in this case, they're going to get started right in the new year. In this case, we'll say January 2nd, 2025. That is the start date. And we think it'll probably take them, a couple of days just to get over those requirements to the architect. So we'll give them a week. Now, for this company this big company that I'm working with to help build this house, we're gonna make a few assumptions. Nobody works on the weekends. Now, I know that is not the case for many companies, but in this case, nobody works on the weekends. So we have to account for that. And we'll say we don't take any other holidays, but we could account for that as well. But it is an American company where nobody works on the weekends. And so our work days are Monday through Friday. And so Excel has a really cool function called Workday. And it allows you to enter in a start date as well as the number of days beyond that start date that you want to add. And you could add in the number of holidays and then it'll subtract those or it'll add days to it just to account for those holidays. So in this case, the formula is workday. I'm going to click on here for start date. And then I'm going to click on here for days. And I'm not going to do anything with the holidays. I'm just going to close the formula and move on. So this is interesting. It does this because it hasn't formatted it. This is Excel's backend version of what a date looks like. And we're actually going to talk about this in a few minutes here. So what you can do is you can just select the entire column here, right click, format the cell, and choose date. Sometimes Excel will auto format it for you, sometimes it won't. If you see this, especially with dates, don't be alarmed, just format it to date. And now it works. And just for reference, the 2nd of January was Thursday. So 5 days is the 3rd, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th is the 5th day. So that worked, and it did not account for weekends. Then what you can do is what most project managers are using Excel for project schedules to do is now the rest of the items in this column, you can use the workday again. You want it to start where the other date ended. And you probably want to add in one day because you want to start the next day. Okay, and then you can just pull this down like we've done before, and it'll adjust the formula. So if you look at the formula up here, it's H, so now it's referencing H4. Now it's referencing H5. There are ways to stop that adjustment if you don't want it to happen, but in this case, we want it to happen, we want it to be free, so it's good. And again, let us update the formatting, date, and time. So there's a question, can we add in more than one person to the role, electrician, plumber, for example? I'm sure there are ways that you can, but definitely gets a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult to maintain. So I wouldn't recommend it. If you want to do more complex stuff, adding more resources to it or so on, you could either add in another task for that resource or maybe try to find a different tool because it really just gets complicated to do that with Excel. It's a lot of maintenance work. Okay, so now we have our start dates, we have our end dates, everything is calculated. So we want to start adding durations and everything will kind of adjust itself automatically here. So again, I have predetermined durations here that I'm just going to copy and paste. So and I made these up, so for those who may have more experience in this, they're going to be laughing at these durations. Please forgive me. So creating a blueprint, submitting plans for bid. We'll say it can take 58 days, about 2 months for creating the blueprint, and maybe another, once you've received them, the blueprint, another month to submit the bids. Then maybe 3 months to receive the bid, 3 months to receive the bids. And then now we have select the best bid. Maybe it might take you a month to review all the bids and then select the right one. For permits, I know this can take some time, but just for the sake of the schedule, we'll say this will take maybe about 15 days to submit for the permits, and then another, I don't know, 45 days to receive the permits. And then everything else we have, we'll just copy and paste. And that is our schedule. One thing to note when you're copying and pasting, sometimes when you copy and paste, it copies and pastes the formatting as well. Sometimes you don't want to copy and paste. Sometimes I copy and paste the formula, and now that formula, the references in it are broken. You might just want to copy and paste the value. There are ways to do that. So when you right click on something, you want to paste the special option. So this just does a direct paste. This will paste the values. And so if you're pasting from, for example, that like if I'm pasting here, this is going to copy the formula, not the value. And so if I want to paste the value, I could right click and select this one, and it'll actually paste the value itself, not the formula. Or you could do just the formula. In this case, it won't do any of the formatting. You could do some transpose stuff, or you could only do the formatting if you want. It's called Format Painter, but they give you this option here as well. And as you hover over them, it does show you what it would look like. In this case, we're not going to do any of that. And yes, I will share the file for future reference, absolutely. And I'll also share videos on YouTube that do a really good job of going through some of this stuff, at least with the charting work that we're going to start right now, actually. Okay, so with regards to charting, now we want visuals, right? Every project schedule, every project manager plan, it's really helpful for visuals so people could see what's going on at a quick glance and not always have to look and dive deep into some of these tables. So we're actually going to create a Gantt chart in Excel. We're going to do this very simply because that also can get overwhelming. So we want to base a Gantt chart on this. And for those who may not know what a Gantt chart is, it's just a visual representation of the duration of each task in one view. We'll show what that looks like here. So we want to base our Gantt chart off of the start date. So I'm going to, again, if you go up the top here, you click this little arrow once you see it. And then I'm going to go to Insert. You could do the specific charts that you want. I usually just go to Recommended Charts. I click on All Charts. Now in this case, I want a bar chart because I want it to be horizontal. And I want a stacked bar chart because I want the data to be stacked, and we'll show why in a second. So I'm going to select that one, and I'm going to click OK. Now I have to do some work to this. This doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't do anything or show me anything at the moment. So we're going to have to do a little bit of work here. First thing first is we have to fix some of the data behind it. If you right click on it, you'll see select data. So now I have to add in more data. So the first thing is the legend or the entries. And so the series here that I want to add is the duration. The duration really is what's going to look at the horizontal line, right? That's the horizontal part that you saw before. So the series name, they call it series, it's just a horizontal line. I'm going to reference right here. Now, when you're doing charts, it actually doesn't reference it by name, it references it by specific cell. And so if you ever want to change it, you actually have to go into it and change it. This is a little bit more in-depth and more involved when you're trying to maintain it. But for now, just referencing this field, it's not really going to change. I think it's good enough. And the series values, I'm going to select as everything in the duration field. And again, it's referencing the specific fields. So if I grow or shrink my schedule, I do have to go back in here and update it. It's not a ton of work, but it is additional effort that you have to remember how to do. It's just something that Excel doesn't allow you to do. It doesn't do it by the reference. So click OK. And then what I want to do is I want the vertical, top to bottom, I want it to, the label to be the tasks. Again, it's doing it by cells and not by reference. So we'll say OK. I'm going to click OK. Now that is much better, but we're not quite there yet. What are these blue lines and what do they mean? They're a little bit confusing. The blue lines essentially just tell you the duration before your actual task starts. And so can't really get rid of them, but what you can do is you can be creative and hide them. So if you double click on a blue line and then make sure all of them are selected, just like this one. Oh, there we go. So you get this format section here that pops up. And so you'll see all of my blue lines are selected here. So I'm going to go to the format and I'm going to say no fill. I don't want any color. So while they are there, they are now hidden until to the end user, they're not, it's as if they're not there. One thing I've noticed is my tasks are backwards. It starts with the latest task on top and the earliest at the bottom. So if I click on this and I go back here to the access options, I expand access options, categorize in reverse order. So now it's in the correct order with my dates at top. But my time frame is a little off. I want the window that I'm looking at to be a little bit more narrow. Now this is something that can get interesting that we talked about earlier today. You can do that. So if you click on here, you'll see, I think, access options. Yes, in the access options, you'll see the bounds of your time frame, the minimum and maximum, and it's using the Excel behind the scenes, the Excel backend version of a date. And so I don't know how to calculate that in my head. So what I do is I'll just go into any random cell. I want the date to start on the 1st of January, and I want it to end when my project ends. In this case, it's going to be a static value. It's not going to be a dynamic value. So I'll copy in this. And like I mentioned before, we'll do a value. Okay. In this case, it actually pasted it in the generic form and not the date format. And I'm going to format this to be generic. So I can copy and paste these two values in the bounds section. So we'll do this one for the start. And we'll do this one for the maximum. Okay, so now my bounds are a little better. So now I have my Gantt chart. You could change the title. You can call it project schedule. You can call it project Gantt, whatever you want. We'll call it project timeline. And you could format it as you learn how to use all the formatting options and tools. You can format it a little bit differently, but this is a quick and easy way to format a Gantt chart into your project. And what you can do is, I'm going to zoom out here quite a bit. You can put it next to the schedule, and it generally aligns as the schedule grows as well. This will grow too, so you can kind of keep it like that, which is on par with a lot of other project management software out there. And what's really great about the way we did it, I'll zoom in here, is it is dynamic. And so if I want to update my schedule to say, you know what, submitting plans or bids, it's actually going to take a lot longer than a month. I think it's going to take, 6 months or whatever. I'll say it's 120 days. Before I do anything, if I click enter, you'll see that everything moved. All of my dates shifted because they're formulaic. All of my Gantt chart shifted. Everything adjusted the way that I needed to adjust. And it's simple. It's straightforward. There's not a lot of logic into the formulas. It just keeps everything straightforward. It may not be accurate to a T, but it's accurate enough that I could manage and track what's going on, what's happening. So that's your Gantt chart. Another thing that I mentioned before is the status. So we're getting back to the status. And this is where the controls tab comes into play. So sometimes you're not going to have a nice table to reference, like resources that we use to reference the assigned to or the role. Sometimes you'll just have to create lists in random places that you could then choose and filter off of and choose as part of your selection criteria. And that's where the controls comes in. So for status, we'll say status title for now. And a status of a task, we'll keep it simple, could be not started, in progress, and complete. And you could add in whatever statuses that you want. But again, we're going to do the same thing here. It might seem redundant, but I'm going to show you why it isn't in a second. We're going to make this a table. My table has headers. I'm going to call it status underscore table. Okay, and then we're going to, like we did before, go to the formulas, name manager. I'm going to change the name here real quick. The status table. Okay. Formulas, name manager, new, we'll call it status underscore title. And it's already referencing it. So click OK, close. And then again here in our, you could select it like that, or you can select each one individually. We'll do data validation, just reiterating what we learned before. We want a list equals status underscore title. So now you have your list of statuses that'll grow and shrink as you add or remove more different types of statuses. Now, what's also cool about this and your controls is why this is important to do as a table is I want to add some metrics. So we'll say metric here. I want to know how many tasks that I have that are not started, in progress, or complete. It'll give me a good picture of the progress of my project. In this case, the home that I'm building. So we're going to do some counting here. So we're going to do equal count. You don't want to just do any count. You want to count if. Now there's two types of count if. There's count if, which allows you to add one criteria that you're going to count, or count ifs, which allows you to add multiple criterias. And so you can count the values in a table if a bunch of things are true or if one thing is true. And if you just use count, you're just counting the values in the table. There's no criteria. You're just going to count everything there. So I think in this case, I only want to do one criteria here. So I'm going to use count if, and it gives you the function. So the range that I'm going to count is the status, and you'll see that I actually reference it by name. So the scheduled table, the status column, and the criteria is that whatever field is in here equals to whatever value is in here. And so you could just click on it. You don't have to do any special formatting or formula. You could just say like that, close it off, and it adds, there is one not started, one none in progress, and none complete. So if I, again, do this, and we'll do just like we did for the permits before. Move that down, and we'll say in progress, in progress. We'll even say, these are somewhat in progress. We're getting some help here, so maybe we've started doing something like this, and these are not started. Not start. Okay, so now you have your list here, and you have your metrics. Now, again, this could be helpful is now I want to add in a metrics field here. So I'm going to just add in some room at the top here. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so you'll see where that comes into place in controls. I'm going to select this, just the metric field. I think actually let's select the table. Insert, charts, all charts, bar chart. Again, I'm going to use my my stacked chart here. So we click on that, and it actually does a decent job. So we're going to say project progress. And I want to add in some labels. So this plus sign is where we get to add in some labels. I want to add in some data labels. So it's actually kind of tough to see. So we're going to change some colors. So I click on just this section here, and I go into the color. I want to make this a lighter color. Because it's not started, I'll say maybe it's a light gray. Right here, this, I'm going to add in, the legend is down here and the legend changes. So we're going to add in this color for in progress. I like the orange, so maybe we'll do that. And there actually is no completed. So if we go in here, actually there's completed. Why did we do that? Let's see what happened. Ah, because it copied and pasted allowed me to bypass data validation, but we need this to be complete. So we'll select complete. What's going on here? I know what happened here. This is something that could happen. I copied and pasted it from a different spreadsheet that has its own data validation. So we're going to have to just redo this quickly and actually copy the data validation there. So that could happen sometimes when you do copy and pasting. I'll be very careful. So we're going to say yes. It's correct. Status titles. Status. There we go. That worked. So now you see one, I like to change the color again to be a little bit lighter. And then what you can do is you can take that and put it right here at the top of your project. You could format it a little bit differently and move things around. And let's add in some space. It'll take it with it, but that's okay. Move back up. So there you go. Now you have, do this, and we'll move this over here. So I'm selecting the wrong thing. There we go. We'll start this here. Now you have your project schedule with some nice visuals to show. You could add in some nice titles. And again, I like to get rid of the grid lines, and you could add in color, add in borders, whatever you like. But you have a dynamic, simple, easy to maintain project schedule. For your projects, you have your list of resources that you can add in as much information as you want here. You can do issues. And so I'll just share the sheet that I've been using as a reference here that I created when I was preparing for this. So bear with me one second. I'll share that right now. I have a little bit more here. So if you go to, I have an issues tracker here, and this is also where you can do the same thing where this issue needs to be resolved by, the contractor, and that's who the contractor is. High impacting issue, again, using your controls here as well, and there. You could insert pivot tables. We didn't touch on that, but I could do that quickly now if you want to insert a pivot table based off of the schedule. It knows what your schedule is, and so I want to know how many tasks are assigned to these people, and so you can do tasks, and it'll count them. One task for Anthony, one task for Claire, two tasks for Frank, and so on and so forth. So you can do pivot tables. Pivot tables are great, and they're dynamic, and they're really cool. You can't format them very well. You kind of have to use the inbox formatting for them, which isn't too bad, but just one thing to note where it might not look as pretty as you can do with a table or anything else. But and you could do with pivots, you could actually do groupings that work out really well. So there's a lot to do with pivot tables that I would recommend you look into as well. And then you can create your dashboards of all these different things. You could add in filters. So if I want to filter by the status, so I only want to show, why did that work? Maybe that's not referencing the right one, but it'll show the different statuses, in this case, blank and everything else. So that will work too. And at 10 minutes left, that is my presentation. Any questions? Would love to hear your thoughts. There's a question I see in the chat. Is there a way to connect Excel calendar date fields to Outlook so they show on an Outlook calendar? Not that I know of, but there are other Microsoft tools that you'd probably want to use instead if that's the functionality that you're looking at. I know there's going to be a Tech Tuesday talk later on in the year that talks about some of the other fields like Microsoft Planner, Microsoft Project, that allow you to do that. But no, not that I know of. Excel does not integrate with Outlook. Okay, there's another question. How do we add dependency tasks, one task after another? That I think you're getting into a bit more complicated formulas. And so you won't be able to add or show visually dependency tasks on your timeline. Sorry, I realize I'm not sharing the screen again. Let me do that. You won't be able to do, or at least cleanly or easily to show it, but you can add in a dependency. And then you could add in a column. Let's move this over here. You could add in a column for dependency. Hope I spelled that right. And you can make the data validation for this column uh, list, this column. Then you could choose a dependency. You can only do, again, one. And then you can add in another row that will VLOOKUP the duration of that dependency. And then you could do a calculation to adjust your start date based on the dependency as well. So it always starts afterwards. And so this would be the duration. I could try to do that quickly here. And that would equal VLOOKUP. I'm going to do this fast. You're going to look up this value here. Oh, sorry, this value in the schedule array, and you're gonna 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're gonna pull 6, well, exact match. So now you'll see 30. Select bid. Select best bid 30. So now you see that, and then you can add in another column here for total duration, and then you could base your start date off of to include workday plus 5 plus 30. Or you could start it off on this on the end date of that. So you can get kind of creative with how you use dependency. So yes, it is possible. And once you have it set up, it may not take a ton of maintenance to do, but it does add complexity to your schedule and to how you maintain it. Glad that was helpful. Um, yes, you will get the file. Any other questions? So projects usually have parallel processes which start at the same time. How can you capture them in a Gantt chart? So the Gantt chart is just a reflection of the values here. And so I'm going to overwrite some of the formulas that we have. So if, for example, this is a very linear, and it's easy to create simple and straightforward formulas on linear, but obviously we know projects aren't like that. So in this case, while we do, for example, get for bids, maybe we'll start the permit process as I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to override this formula, and I'm going to say we're going to start this so this says it's going to start. I'm going to say we're going to start this in December 1st of 2025. So now you have parallel processes, and the Gantt chart will just reflect that. So now you'll start to see these parallel processes going, they're overlapping. So the Gantt chart will always reflect the start and end time on each individual row, as long as you reflect that properly here. Again, now you have some cells with formulas, some cells without formulas, and so you'll just have to keep track of that. And that's fine, it's common, that's not a big deal. It's just something you always have to remember. So I hope that helped. Can you, yep, share the file. Can we add more? Okay, I think I've answered all the questions in the chat. Are there any more?
Yeah, I think I'm going through it as well. I think you did manage to answer all the questions. We are about to wrap up, but John, I know you wanted to mention something about office hours in case people had questions after this. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, as part of the PMO, we have a lot of different resources that I'm going to share with you all after this. I'll share links to some really quick and easy YouTube videos that helped to represent what I'm doing here. I've used them in the past, and they've helped sort of guide what I've done here. I'm going to share a link to, we offer office hours. And so you could schedule, I believe it's a half hour with either myself, my boss, Victor Farrell, or one of the managers within the OSPM. His name is Lawrence Smith, all seasoned project managers, all fantastic with Excel. So we'll send you that link. Feel free to schedule us office hours with us, talk about anything at all, especially project manager related or Excel, anytime you find time within the office hours link. So we'll schedule that. We have trainings that you could sign up for. we have a knowledge hub. So we have our own SharePoint site that offers a lot of different content, links to trainings and links to a lot of different things as well, including Tech Tuesdays. But it has a lot of templates. Some of them are Excel templates, some of them are Word templates, some of them are guides. If you're looking to get your PMP, we have a path to the PMP. And how to use different tools and so on. This will be on there as well once we get the recording. And so we're going to give you a lot of different links to all things project management at Weill Cornell.
And yes, Thomas, I'll send a follow-up email within the next day. I just want to give John some time to put those resources together. Once he sends it to me, I'll make sure I'll get it to all of you. And then, of course, if you have any questions after that, feel free to just reply to the email and we can certainly help you out as best we can.
My top favorite project management tool that I see there, a simple one. So I always tend to go to Trello because it is a free tool that you could use anywhere for anything in your life and is a Kanban base where it has your columns. So it's one of my favorites because it's very simple and easy and straightforward. And many other tools tend to replicate that format. Microsoft Planner is another one. So working at Weill using Project for the Web and Microsoft Planner are fantastic tools because it integrates everything into Outlook, into the resources available, into Microsoft Teams. And so the whole Microsoft ecosystem has come a long way and actually done really fantastic work in helping provide tools for project management. And we're going to get into that, I think, in a future Tech Tuesday. No, okay, so is Trello or MS Planner better than Notion? I am a Notion user. I absolutely love Notion, but when you're talking about MS Planner, if you're work somewhere where you're using Microsoft products, use the Microsoft products available to you because it's all integrated and it's wonderful, list and everything. If you're not, Trello is wonderful too because you can give access to others, visual, read, write, view access. Usually, I don't know if they change their permissions free. Notion is a great note-taking tool, and it does a lot of project management functionality, but you, just like Excel, you have to set that up. It's similar to Excel where it's a blank slate that you have to know how to interact and set up and format Notion and add in formulas to do that for you. So it's closer to Excel in terms of how you have to configure it than it is to any other project that does project management out of the box. But I am a Notion lover. I do use it for all my note taking. I have configured it for all of my work streams, my notes, and my stakeholders and database and everything. So if you want to see more about that, just ping me. I'm happy to share with you how I've configured Notion.
Yeah, and John, just a note about Notion. I know that you mentioned Microsoft integration. The version of Notion that would meet that criteria would be Loop.
Yes.
It's not, I don't think it's quite as robust as Notion, but if you were looking to stay within the Microsoft environment, you could check out Microsoft Loop, which is part of your O365 account as well.
Loop will be part of our talk when we do the Microsoft talk in a couple I think a couple of months.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on in the next couple months, so I'll be sure to share the news about the topics that are coming up as we get them. But thank you guys so much for attending today's session and learning more about project management with Excel. John, thank you for putting this together for us and for sharing the resources that I'm going to send out to everybody later. Keep an eye out for that email and have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone. Really appreciate you spending some time here learning more about Excel. Have a good one, guys. Thanks, John.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.